Hey, this is Zulema Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. A bit of dubious news by way of the women's super featherweight division. It appears that the reigning WBA champion, Hyun-Mi Choi of South Korea, this division's longest reigning champion, will be returning to action next month on the 15th against the novice-level opponent in Ringo, an opponent that only has 3 professional contests, 3 professional bouts in her resume. This confirms a bit of information that Alicia Baumgartner communicated to me some weeks ago. Before the Michaela Mayer fight was officially announced, Alicia Baumgartner communicated to me that they weren't having any luck with Hyun-Mi Choi, that what Hyun-Mi Choi wanted was a hometown defense because of some record that she's trying to break. I guess she's attempting to break the record in title defenses? Who knows? But what we can see is she's shooting for a hometown title defense as opposed to a unification match. And she's been offered too. She's been offered a Michaela Mayer fight, and she was offered an Alicia Baumgartner fight. An Alicia Baumgartner unification match. It seems that Hyun-Mi Choi, this division's longest reigning champion, arguably the most accomplished, arguably, since she is a 2-division champion, and this division's longest reigning champion. She's been this division's reigning WBA champion for approximately 8 to 9 years. She won the title way back when, in 2013, but hasn't unified it yet. Sporting a professional record of 19 wins, no losses, with 1 draw, and 5 knockouts. Only 31 years old. This is a fighter who is still at her physical peak, at the height of her powers in her physical prime, and she means to extend her reign as a champion by playing it safe, not taking on any risky fights, any risky matches, legacy fights and legacy matches like unifying titles with Michaela Mayer or Alicia Baumgartner. It seems that Hyun-Mi Choi is not in any hurry to unify with those champions the same way she wanted to unify with Terry Harper. Perhaps she viewed the Terry Harper fight as a more winnable fight. Perhaps she viewed Terry Harper as being a more beatable opponent, a more beatable champion than those champions. As it seems, she suddenly got cold feet and she doesn't want to unify anymore. She's reshifted her focus, or her team has. In any event, the end result is all the same. Hyun-Mi Choi rather take on a novice-level opponent in a voluntary title defense than unify titles with her fellow champions. It's kind of disgraceful, don't you think? You've been reigning as a champion for 9 years, you haven't unified yet? I sincerely doubt that Hyun-Mi Choi stands to make in this voluntary title defense what she could have made unifying with Alicia or Michaela Mayer. Those 2 fighters, those 2 champions, they're with major promotional outfits after all. The most money you can aspire to make as a super featherweight in today's women's super featherweight division would be in those fights with those fighters, those champions. You're not going to make fighting this girl what you could make fighting them. She means to extend her reign as a champion by not taking on risky fights. And, ideally, this would be the part where the WBA steps in, where the WBA intervenes. This is why Michaela Mayer was calling for Hyun-Mi Choi to be stripped of that title. When's the last time that Hyun-Mi Choi satisfied a mandatory challenger for the WBA anyway? When's the last time they ordered her to take on a mandatory challenger? In the WBA's last set of updated rank standings, former WBC lightweight champion Delphine Persoon ranks in at number 1. Delphine Persoon, who, since losing her WBC title to Katie Taylor up there at 135, has since moved down to 130, and she's been campaigning there ever since. When do we expect the WBA to order a fight between them, a fight between Delphine Persoon and Hyun-Mi Choi? I think Delphine Persoon still has what it takes to beat Hyun-Mi Choi, in spite of Delphine being some years older than Hyun-Mi. There are a host of up-and-comers climbing those ranks, Delphine Persoon among them, a former champion, and an unbeaten up-and-comer trailing her in Rima Ayadi of France. Former IBF featherweight champion Jennifer Hahn, she ranks in at number 3. Ella Mechaled, who very recently suffered her first professional loss to Delphine Persoon, she ranks in at number 4. Unbeaten Ramona Grafe ranks in at number 5.
I don't know why the WBA's letting Hyun-Mi Choi hang on to that belt, because she's not the most active fighter.
Her fights, whenever she does fight, can't be making the WBA all that much money. She barely fights, and when she does, they're not high-profile fights. The high-profile fights involve Alicia Baumgartner, involve Michaela Mayer, and those ain't the kind of fights, those ain't the kind of fighters that Hyun-Mi Choi is fighting. So why has the WBA allowed her to hold that title hostage all this time?
Without the WBA's intervention, there's not much that can be done about this.
You really can't force Hyun-Mi Choi to unify titles with another champion, but what you can do is force her to satisfy a mandatory challenger or force her to vacate. That you can do, in the hopes that that mandatory challenger is more willing to take on those champions than she is. Ideally, that would be the solution, but the WBA picks and chooses when they want to do their job.
Well, they won't force Leo Santa Cruz to fight Lee Wood, but they'll order Dimitri Bivol to fight Zerto Ramirez.
Oh, they'll order a fight like that, but they won't order Gervonta Davis versus Heaven Daney. No, they don't want to make Gervonta look bad for not taking the fight if an order comes down. They won't order that fight. They won't order Hyun-Mi Choi to satisfy any mandatory challengers.
Stuff like this is why divisions start to stagnate after a while.
I don't know what kind of odds you can give a Ringo to beat Hyun-Mi Choi and take that WBA title from her. Doesn't seem likely since she's just a novice.
So for the time being, the WBA title is held hostage.
In men's heavyweight news, former unified heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz, ahead of his upcoming pay-per-view fight with Luis Ortiz, says he wants to fight for the vacant WBC title, but he's also preparing for Alexander Usyk. Andy Ruiz has his immediate future all mapped out. It includes a shot at the vacant WBC heavyweight title or a crack at Alexander Usyk. The former unified champion who battered Anthony Joshua out of America in 2019 is currently training for a clash with Luis Ortiz. Ruiz and King Kong will wage war on pay-per-view in a Premier Boxing Champions event slated for September 4th.
Well, Luis Ortiz is a southpaw, so is Alexander Usyk.
So in some ways it's preparation for an Usyk fight, though let's be honest, Luis Ortiz is not Alexander Usyk's carbon copy.
Just because they're both southpaws don't make them twinsies.
If victorious, Ruiz hopes to fight for Tyson Fury's green belt once the Briton finally vacates after confirming his retirement. Should Fury decide to remain in the sport, Ruiz has a backup plan to challenge the winner of Usyk versus Joshua 2. The Destroyer believes Usyk will inflict a third career loss on his ex-opponent next month. Therefore, Ruiz is already honing his skills to battle the formidable Ukrainian. I'm on a mission. I want to get that green belt, Ruiz told Ellie Sekbak during a visit to his home gym. And at this time, there are currently no alphabet titles on the PBC side of things for PBC fighters to fight for.
Sucks for them.
So I don't know what's going to happen or whether or not Tyson Fury is going to vacate the belt. I don't know who is going to be the person to try and win that belt, but that's my mission now. After I get that WBC title, I can retire. Having lost 2 fights consecutively to Tyson Fury over the span of, 2 years? The WBC still decided to rank Deontay Wilder at number 1.
It's almost like they're in a hurry to put that green belt back in his hands.
I mean, think about it. Let's say that Alexander Usyk ends up beating Anthony Joshua for the second time. And let's say that Tyson Fury, he doesn't want to come out of retirement. He wants to stay retired. Well, the belt goes vacant, and who's in the pole position to catch it when it does?
Deontay Wilder is. He's ranked at number 1.
It's been 8 going on 9 months since Deontay Wilder lost to Tyson Fury for the second time. You know, when he lost the second fight to Fury and Deontay Wilder was able to maintain a top spot in the WBC's rank standings, you could have argued that as a former champion who had several successful title defenses, he deserved some consideration from the WBC. But here today, here and now, having lost to Tyson Fury again 8 months ago, there's really no excuse for him to be ranked at number 1. There's no reason for it.
The first time he lost, I could have understood, but the second...
You know what those guys are doing. As far as Usyk versus Joshua 2 and the challenger bringing in Robert Garcia as his new trainer, Ruiz added, I think it's good. I think he needs a Mexican on his side, especially Robert. With all his fighters, he makes them aggressive and counterpunch. That is what Anthony Joshua needs to do. He needs to be aggressive. He's the bigger man, the stronger man. But Usyk is fearless. It's hard to win against someone who is fearless and has a lot of confidence. I think that's one of the keys to winning a fight when you're the person that everyone is doubting.
It's likely the mindset he adopted ahead of the first Anthony Joshua fight.
I think Usyk will be like having more motivation for his people and his country. He'll be thinking, there's no way I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna stay a champion. I think Usyk has that mentality, plus he is a Christian, and he believes in Jesus Christ. I low-key want him to win. Also, that's why I'm fighting a lefty, so I can get prepared in case I have to fight Usyk. I have got to look ahead. Even that guy, the 6'9" heavyweight dude that Robert Garcia has, Antonio Mireles, I feel like he's helping me. He's tall. Even though I give him that really good work, he's helping me.
Helping him measure Tyson Fury.
Deontay Wilder ranks in at number 1. And should Tyson Fury make the decision to stay retired, he's in a pole position to challenge for the WBC title. More so than Andy. Andy's all the way down there at number 5. Ahead of Andy is Joe Joyce at number 2, Joseph Parker at number 3, Frankie Sanchez at number 4, and Andy Ruiz at number 5.
The guy most in line to fight for the green belt, if it goes vacant, is Deontay Wilder.
Now, Joe Joyce, by way of the WBC, he might be ranked in at number 2, but by way of the WBO, he's ranked in at number 1. He's already in a pole position to challenge the winner of Joshua versus Usyk.
He might be ranked by the WBC, but by all accounts, he seems to be going the WBO route.
Old Fish Eyes Frank Warren, he's always had a way with WBO, so is his old buddy, Bob Arum. I don't get the sense that Joe Joyce is pursuing the green belt. Joseph Parker, I don't think he's pursuing it either. I think he wants easy money.
He went over to Sky Sports and Boxer so he could stay on Easy Street and make easy money.
Yeah, he might be ranked in at number 3 by way of the WBC, but I don't know how interested he really is in pursuing the green belt. Behind Joseph is Frankie Sanchez, a PBC fighter the same way that Deontay and Andy are PBC fighters.
But remember, if Andy Ruiz ends up beating Luis Ortiz, that'll move him up those ranks, perhaps ahead of Frankie.
And don't forget that Frankie Sanchez, for a guy like Wilder, guy on the rebound, guy who's currently ranked in at number 1 by way of the WBC, for Deontay, as a comeback fight, Frankie Sanchez would be a high-risk, low-reward. I don't think Wilder's people have any intention of entertaining a Frankie Sanchez fight, but an Andy Ruiz fight...
Think about it. What if Deontay comes back against the winner of Kovnowski versus Demirez?
Maybe the rumors check out and Deontay Wilder comes back in October against the winner of that fight, or maybe Robert Helenius, the way that Frank Warren's been saying. Frank, that rumor, it came from him. In any event, let's say Wilder comes back in October. By the time he comes back, the outcome of Ruiz versus Ortiz will have been decided.
And if Andy Ruiz emerges the victor in that fight...
Belt or no belt, one in-house heavyweight clash that the PBC can make is Wilder versus Ruiz. The battle of the former champions. With the green belt or without the green belt. It all depends on whether or not Tyson Fury really decides to retire.
Yeah, and it all depends on whether or not Deontay Wilder decides to retire.
And yeah, it all depends on whether or not Andy Ruiz emerges the victor in the Ortiz fight, because if Ortiz wins, well, nobody wants to see a third fight between Wilder and Ortiz.
You see how immaterial things are right now at heavyweight?
A lot of different scenarios at heavyweight are contingent upon a lot of different outcomes.
Personally, I think the WBC should have took back their title as soon as Tyson Fury announced his retirement.
What are you giving this guy all this leeway for? Nobody gets to fight for that belt until that guy makes up his mind, and you're letting that guy take his sweet time. If he's retired, then let him stay retired and give back the green belt. Let somebody else fight for it. Somebody who's not retired.
That is, somebody who didn't very recently announce their retirement, even though most people think they're not actually retired.
I think that course of action would have went a long way towards simplifying the situation at heavyweight, because right now it's convoluted, it's conflated, it's confusing. And finally, there seems to be a domestic rivalry brewing in the land down under. Tszyu hits back at insecure George Kambosos after pay-per-view swipe.
Somebody took a swipe at a pay-per-view?
Did Tszyu take a swipe at George Kambosos Jr.? I must have missed it. Your guess is as good as mine. It's the rivalry that never was until George Kambosos lost his belts to Devin Haney in June, and now Tszyu has clapped back at the former unified world lightweight champion following a swipe over who Australia's pay-per-view king is. Tszyu is still waiting for confirmation of a date for his chance at becoming the undisputed king of the super welterweight division against champion Jermell Charlo, undisputed champion, which is expected to take place in the U.S. in either October or November. He plans on taking his entire camp to America.
Tszyu has since gotten the confirmation he was looking for.
The fight with Jermell ain't going down in October or November. It's not going down till January of next year, towards the end of it, the end of January.
Practically February.
We talked about that here on the channel. Tszyu has plans of taking his entire camp to America in preparation for the bout, as he slowly puts things together following a recent problem with both hands. While Kambosos has hinted his rematch with Haney will take place in a bout slated for October in Australia, the former champion had plenty to say in recent weeks after his loss regarding Tszyu's place at the top of the pay-per-view tree in Australia. "I'm still the biggest name in Australian boxing," Kambosos told News Corp. "Tim can barely get crowds to his fights in Australia. The last time I checked, when did Tszyu fight in front of 41,000 fans in a packed stadium? He can barely get 10,000 to his fights. It's small-time stuff. Even against Jeff Horn in August of 2020, it was Horn's name that attracted the crowd." Both men trained at Tszyu's Rockdale gym before a falling out led to Kambosos going his own way and taking up his training under Aussie Justin Fortune rather than Tszyu's uncle Igor Golubev. The swipe was all the more surprising given Kambosos has always played the straight bat when asked about Tszyu in the lead up to all his bouts, never straying from wishing him luck. Speaking to Wide World of Sports, Tszyu seemed unfazed by Kambosos' bold statement, defending his ability to draw in a crowd. "I don't really understand all that. I don't know if it's come from him or whoever. In the last 2 years, we've had COVID. People have been fighting in front of no one, and we were able to do something," Tszyu said. In terms of the 10,000, that much at the Kudos Bank Arena, that was sold out. I don't know where he's getting that from. Look, you have fighters in America fighting at the MGM Grand with 10,000 people. I think 10,000 people is actually an achievement. It's not an underachievement. I've got nothing bad to say about him at all, man. I wish him luck. He's doing great things for boxing in Australia, and he's doing great things for his family. In terms of talking bad about me, I guess, I wasn't brought up in a family to say bad things about people. If he's got something bad to say, that's his insecurities, and it's his problem, not mine. George Kambosos Jr. seems to think that he's the biggest name in Australian boxing based on the viewing figures for the Devin Haney fight. Kambosos' unanimous decision loss to Haney reportedly garnered less than 60,000 pay-per-view buys, well short of Tszyu's record of 100,000, a feat he achieved twice against Jeff Horn and Bowen Morgan in 2020. Although the 21-0 fighter did share the card with Paul Galen and Mark Hunt in the later clash. George's claim towards being the biggest name in Australian boxing is tenuous to say the least. It's tenuous because his reign as a champion was short-lived, and unlike Tszyu, he doesn't have that Tszyu name, that surname. Kostya Tszyu's like fucking royalty in Australia, so what do you think his sons are? Tszyu, Nikita Tszyu, just them being Tszyus is going to draw attention to their fights, coupled with the fact that they're pretty goddamn good, both Tszyu and Nikita Tszyu. And in the thick of the pandemic, Tszyu was still able to draw eyes towards domestic Australian boxing. Might seem like small potatoes to me and you here in America, but Tszyu set a record in Australia with his pay-per-view buys. The way I see it, Tim was right. George lost that fight, now he's feeling insecure, and what this was him lashing out. Misplaced anger. That's what it is.